On this episode, two medical mysteries that defied the experts.
Something is wrong with my child. Can somebody please just tell me what's wrong with my kid?
They kept saying, hey, wait, he'll grow. We waited, and he didn't grow.
When Ricky Getch celebrates his second birthday, it's all too clear that there's something very wrong. He weighs only 18 pounds and can fit inside a shoebox.
I always knew I was different than everybody else.
My biggest worry was that we would find out what it was, but we would just find out too late.
Then, Noel Valero's life begins to spin out of control when a series of bizarre symptoms takes over.
The pain just kind of engulfed me.
I was very worried that he was going to wind up in a wheelchair.
I was frightened. I braced myself for the worst.
In the spring of 1986, Yvette Qualls was finishing a degree in social work at a college in Tallahassee, Florida. While she spent most of her free time in church, she never expected to find romance there.
When we first met, I was 20 and Charlie was 25.
The thing that really attracted me to her to start with was she just radiated the personality that I was looking for.
We dated for 2 weeks and then got engaged. I was always considered the most level-headed person. For me to only spend 2 weeks with someone and then get engaged, that was just a little off character. But I just loved the way he thought about the world and the way he treated other people. We got married on January the 24th, 1987.
2 years later, the Getches are ready to think about becoming parents.
Charlie and I had started trying to conceive. We tried for over a year with no success. The next plan of action was that we go on a low dosage of fertility drugs. Everybody was asking us, well, when are you going to have a baby? When are you going to have a baby? Emotionally, it was really hard because I was really scared that it might not happen.
But just as Yvette begins to accept that she may not have a child of her own, she receives some thrilling news.
I went into the doctor's office and found out I was pregnant.
I was really excited to know that we were pregnant because of the difficulty we'd been through to have the baby.
On October 16th, 1992, Yvette goes into labor, and after 16 long hours, she and Charles welcome their son into the world.
We decided to name our baby Charles Frederick Getch Jr. after Charlie, and we decided to call him Ricky.
There's nothing compared to holding your own son or own daughter in your own arms for the first time.
I adjusted to the routine of being a new mom, I think pretty well, except for the lack of sleep.
The best thing I liked about being a father is being able to have him with me, we relaxing in front of the TV and both taking a nap. And if he moved, I was wide awake in a heartbeat.
But it's not long before the new parents notice something unusual about their son.
Ricky didn't feed very well initially. He had trouble latching on. I was nursing him every 2 to 3 hours. The problem was that he didn't take a lot at one time. So I was really concerned.
Worried that her son isn't getting enough to eat, Yvette makes an appointment with Ricky's pediatrician. However, the doctor is confident that nothing is wrong.
And he said, he seems to be pretty healthy. The doctor recommended that we just continue to feed him. I said, well, but he's really smaller than all the other babies that I have seen. He just kept telling us that, he seemed healthy other than he was small.
But Ricky's sluggish appetite persists, and by the time he's 3 weeks old, the infant has gained only a few ounces. He's hardly bigger than an average newborn.
I could put his head in my hand and his feet would not even touch my elbow. Still, at 2 months, he was still fitting in my arm, and that concerned me. The doctors kept telling her to just wait, that he'd start growing.
With each passing week, the young parents begin to accept that their son may simply be petite. But one December evening, when Ricky is 2 months old, a frightening incident makes them reconsider everything.
I went back to the bassinet to check on him, and when I got back there, he was making kind of weird gurgling sounds.
There was mucus all over the place coming out of his nose, and that scared us, being new parents.
He was struggling to breathe, and so we knew it was an emergency. I think my biggest fear at that point in time was that Ricky might actually just stop breathing. Immediately, we grabbed Ricky and got in the car.
And I probably broke a few speed limits getting there, but he's my son, my newborn son. I had to get him to the hospital so he could get the proper care.
He sounded awful. We were just scared that he was struggling to breathe. I thought that we were going to end up in the hospital with a really, really sick baby.
When we finally got to the ER, they took him back, gave him a breathing treatment.
And the doctor told us that he had bronchiolitis.
Bronchiolitis is a common condition characterized by severe inflammation and mucus buildup in the lungs.
The treatment for that would be antibiotics. The doctor felt really comfortable that he was breathing fine and that if we went home with the medicine that he would be okay. Ricky did fairly well for about 4 to 5 weeks before he had another episode of a respiratory infection. When we took Ricky back to the doctor, he was just like, well, some kids get repeated respiratory infections. So the doctor didn't seem alarmed at all.
In fact, over the next 8 months, Ricky is hit by a bronchial infection again and again.
Ricky would get sick every 3 weeks. Instead of a kid getting older and getting better, what we saw was a child who seemed to be getting sick more and more and more often.
Making matters worse, Yvette can't help but notice that her son is still not growing.
When Ricky was 13 months old, he weighed about 16 pounds, 4 ounces. A regular baby will weigh 23, 24 pounds at a year. So Ricky was well under what he should weigh for that time. The doctor was like, well, you've got to remember, he's been sick a lot. He's had respiratory infections. Let's just see how he does when he starts not being sick so much. But I knew it wasn't normal for him to keep being sick. I went to find another pediatrician. He said all that mucus and the fact that he didn't gain weight, those are the symptoms of cystic fibrosis.
Cystic fibrosis is a genetic condition in which mucus builds up in the lungs. It initially causes breathing problems and eventually leads to severe lung damage and early death.
I was alarmed. I knew that if we had that diagnosis, that we were looking, at a kid that wouldn't even make it to 35. And that is the hardest thing that I think I went through. Ricky was tested for cystic fibrosis in January of 1994.
I was thinking, is he going to die?
Since the day their son Ricky was born, Yvette and Charles Getch have suspected that there's something wrong with him. At just under 2, Ricky Getch is the size of a child half his age and is plagued by constant respiratory infections. The family's pediatrician is confident that he's suffering from cystic fibrosis, a potentially life-threatening condition.
As a mom, waiting for results from tests are excruciating. To think that I could actually lose him, that we would only have that short amount of time, those kinds of fears for me were really hard.
But after 48 hours, the doctor has some welcome news.
The test came back, he did not have cystic fibrosis.
For me, that was like, thank God it's not cystic fibrosis. I know something's wrong with him, but it's not that. When Ricky turned 2 in October of 1994, Ricky weighed 18 pounds. 2-year-olds weigh anywhere from 28 to 40 pounds. So already Ricky was weighing 10 pounds less than the smaller kids his age.
I always knew I was different than everybody else because everybody was taller than me. Everybody always had a little bit more like muscle or fat on them, and I was just like skin and bones.
The problem was that Ricky only literally ate 3 to 4 bites of something and he was done. So I knew he wasn't getting enough calories.
It was a very constant battle, and we'd try to get him to eat more, and he'd start screaming.
When I was younger, sometimes I wouldn't eat as much because I'd get full really fast. I didn't get hungry, so I just wouldn't eat that much.
It was just hard as a mom knowing that you need your child to eat, and he just really wasn't hungry. Ricky didn't ask for food. I just knew in my gut. I knew that there was something wrong.
The scary part was the unknown. Didn't know what was causing it, and that's what really worried me.
At the end of her rope, Yvette takes Ricky back to his pediatrician and demands an explanation.
The doctor said he has been a really sick kid, and we're going to label him as failure to thrive.
Failure to thrive is a catch-all term for children who aren't gaining weight at a normal rate.
I was just thinking, so you're going to sit here and tell me that I have a 19-pound, 2.5-year-old, and that I'm just supposed to think that everything's okay.
Desperate for answers, Yvette goes from specialist to specialist, but no one can explain why Ricky isn't growing.
I was going on into over 2 years into a search of what was going on with my child. I'd taken Ricky to so many doctors. Ricky had had so many tests, and I'm sitting here going, something is wrong with my child. Can somebody please just tell me what's wrong with my kid?
They kept saying, hey, wait, he'll grow. We waited. He didn't grow.
As time ticked on, my biggest worry was that we would find out what it was, but we would just find out too late.
As kindergarten approaches, Yvette and Charles are heartsick, knowing that in school, Ricky will be different because of his tiny size.
I knew that if Ricky didn't start growing, people would laugh at him, pick on him, and call him names.
In kindergarten, sometimes I'd have to have help getting into the seats because they were too high. I had this really bad bully. He'd pick on me, call me midget, all this stuff. I always felt like I was kind of like different than everybody. For the most part, that was the most frustrating thing about being smaller.
At 5 years old, he's still in baby clothes, basically. It's heartbreaking. I knew there was something wrong all along, but to see him was heartbreaking.
There was no doubt in my mind that there had to be something that was going on that people were just missing. So I went out on a search, and my search led me to Dr. Parks.
I first saw Ricky when he was 6.5 years old. His mom brought him for another opinion about the reasons for his failure to gain weight and to grow in height.
Dr. Parks looked at Ricky's charts, he looked at Ricky's history, and it was almost like for the first time, I had a doctor who treated me as a partner in trying to find out what was going on with my kid.
Dr. Parks immediately notices something Yvette and Charles have always overlooked: the particular configuration of the features on Ricky's face.
Ricky had a normal-sized head and a small chin. At 6.5, he was about the size of a 3-year-old, but he was unusually thin. I concluded that Ricky had Russell-Silver syndrome.
Russell-Silver syndrome, or RSS, is a rare form of dwarfism. In healthy individuals, the genes that trigger cell multiplication control a child's growth. But in patients like Ricky, for some unknown reason, the genes turn off, stunting growth and resulting in extremely small stature.
I'd gotten kind of scared about just hearing the word Russell-Silver syndrome. I would just have to stop myself and say, God, you gave me a beautiful child. Please just let everything work out and let him be okay. What I found is that Ricky wasn't going to die. While Ricky may be short, and while Ricky may never reach what we would consider to be, normal family height, what I did know from that is it wasn't a death sentence. That was the most important thing. If it was Rusell Silver, I could live with that. My concern was that if Ricky kept growing at the rate he was growing, that he wouldn't even be 5 foot tall when he was an adult. Ricky, at the time when we were looking at his growth chart, was headed for about 4'9", final adult height, which for a guy is devastating. That just wasn't an option.
While no other doctor recognized the condition, Ricky's lack of appetite and inability to grow are the main features of the disease.
I think the problems with weight gain are complex. Some of it's reflux, some of it's just a poor appetite. There's also the issue that the number of fat cells may be lower than that in the average child.
When we finally got our diagnosis, I was very happy because here he is, 5.5 years old. We finally find out what's wrong with him, why he's not eating, why he's not growing.
Dr. Parks goes on to tell the family that while most types of dwarfism are incurable, growth hormones have been proven to reverse Rusell Silver syndrome. There's a good chance that Ricky could be normal if they start the treatment right away.
My parents told me that I had Rusell Silver syndrome. They told me that I'd have to start taking all these shots and I wouldn't necessarily be as big as the other kids, but I knew that the shots would help me grow.
Dr. Parks also prescribes a drug to stimulate Ricky's appetite.
4 or 5 days after Ricky started that medication, he actually said he was hungry. For most parents, that wouldn't mean a whole lot, but for me, I'd gone almost 6 years. I'd never heard the words, "I'm hungry," ever come out of his mouth.
For so long, he was off the growth chart. And finally, he started easing back onto it, and that was a celebration for us.
I felt like I started catching up to my classmates in height and weight was probably around 4th and 5th grade. I wasn't the shortest anymore. One of the biggest moments about catching up in school was I used to have a bully, and I finally caught up to that kid and actually outgrew him. And one day I was just like, "See, you can't call me midget anymore. I'm bigger than you."
While they are thrilled with their son's progress, Yvette and Charles can't help but wonder why it took so long for doctors to diagnose Ricky.
At that time, there were no tests available to see whether he did or did not have that condition. Rusell Silver syndrome occurs in roughly 1 in 50,000 to 1 in 100,000 children.
I'm not sure why so many doctors miss this diagnosis. I guess because it's so rare. Probably a lot of doctors have not heard of it. The frustrating part of being on this long road to diagnosis was all the doctors kept missing it.
Ricky's always been such a fighter that I was really afraid that it could take an emotional toll on him.
When Ricky Getch was 6.5 years old, he was diagnosed with Rusell Silver syndrome, an extremely rare type of dwarfism that can be treated with growth hormones.
My hopes for getting Ricky treatment was that Ricky would get to be 5'4". That was my dream goal. 5'4" is normal height range in my eyes for a guy. It's a little bit short, but it works.
Today, Ricky has made a full recovery and is enjoying his senior year of high school to the fullest.
Ricky is 5'9". Never thought I'd see that day when he hit 5'9". Really, never thought I'd see that day.
Now I'm 18. I love just hanging out with friends, going outside, throwing the frisbee around, just anything a normal teenager would like to do.
It's great to see him come from what he was at 5.5 years old, weighing 25 pounds, to 18 years old and being 5'9". It is great. It's an answer to prayer.
I think it's helpful for other kids with RSS to meet me, hear my story and all that, because they can see someone that has RSS just like them and know that they're not out of luck. They look up to me and they can see that they won't always be the small kid at school.
We've been extremely blessed. I mean, I feel like we've had so many miracles. Ricky's happy, he's healthy, he's got a great self-esteem, and he's turned out to be just an awesome young man. And as a mom, what more could you ask for?
We'll be there. We'll support him all the way in everything he does. We've done that ever since he started this journey, and we'll be with him the whole time.
My parents never gave up. They kept fighting for an answer, pushing for an answer, kept going to all these doctors to see why I was so small. If they hadn't have kept pushing, I would not be as tall as I am. I like to thank my parents for never giving up on me and finding an answer.